This section focuses on the photosystems of photosynthesis. The photosystem is involved in the light reactions. Remember, light reactions in photosynthesis require light, so these reactions will occur during the day when you have a source of light, being the sun. What is the job of a photosystem? The photosystem is responsible for gathering the light energy. How does it do that? When we've talked previously, we've considered photosynthetic pigments, and in particular, we have focused on chlorophyll. The photosystem is a protein that is full of chlorophyll. Why is this important? The chlorophyll acts to absorb the sun's light energy. Remember, chlorophyll is green. Do you remember why? Do you remember why this is important in light energy? If not, you should go back to the previous videos. Chlorophyll in this case is responsible for absorbing light energy. When it absorbs light energy, it actually becomes excited. In chemistry, when we talk about molecules being excited, what we're most interested in is the release of electrons. In photosystems for photosynthesis, the entire purpose of that photosystem is to harvest electrons from chlorophyll. Now, in this process, what we see is something called a primary electron acceptor. We saw this in cellular respiration as oxygen. It makes your cell respiration efficient. The same is true here. It's a primary electron acceptor rather than oxygen is another compound to help us move electrons around. Remember, we called these taxi cabs, or NADH. These will help us move electrons to the other photosystems and eventually to the Calvin cycle or the dark reaction where we can actually make glucose. So in our light energy reactions, we're actually going to move these electrons between two different photosystems and harvest the electrons from two different photosystems when we're all done. We actually start with photosystem 2. This is typically very confusing for folks. The thing that you need to remember is that photosystem 2 is also known as P680. Photosystem 1 is also known as P700. What do these numbers mean? If we're talking about light, what do you think they mean? P680 refers to the highest point of absorption, or the highest wavelength absorption in our photosystem. So it's absorbing wavelength 680 nanometers from the sun. The same is true of P700. Its highest wavelength absorption is 700 nanometers. Do you remember what color this would be to your eye? Right. It's in the red spectrum. So what we're looking for are pigments that absorb very highly in the red spectrum, reflect the green light back to us. We see the plants as being green. But in that high peak of absorption of P680 and P700, the light is exciting that chlorophyll and it's releasing electrons. Our goal is to actually have it released to our carrier so that we can make it into the Calvin cycle. Remember, this is also known as the dark reaction. For our purposes, we are not interested in following the bouncing electron from point to point to point. I'm interested in you knowing about photosystems and that their role is to absorb light energy. And when the chlorophyll becomes excited, it will release electrons. Now, we cannot leave our chlorophyll in an oxidized state, loss of electrons. So what we need to do is actually look at where those replacement electrons are coming from. And as you can see right here, they're coming from water. So in our reaction overview, when we said that we split water to gain electrons for this system, this is where it's occurring. Those electrons from water are being given to the P680 chlorophyll. All this is doing is stabilizing the system. It's replacing the electrons. So when we look at our gain of electrons reduced, or GER, when this pigment gains electrons, its charge will actually be reduced, correct? Right. This is a redox reaction. It loses electrons first to this electron acceptor, and then it's going to replace those electrons from water. That's the essence of the light reaction in photosynthesis. The products that are produced from this light reaction are NADP. Remember, that's our taxi cab carrier for our electrons. And it's going to take electrons to the dark reaction. We're also going to make ATP. Remember, that's our basic cellular energy storage. And we're going to make oxygen. Where did that oxygen come from? If you take water and subtract off its electrons, you're left with oxygen.